Bill wants me to record a Codex review series with Arthur? Guy doesn't even know what a codex is. He's gonna spend the whole episode calling them battle tomes. I'm gonna need some help.
Trident Wargaming. Build it, paint it, play it.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another wonderful Trident evening. I will be podcasting with the other two members of my Trident trio tonight. That's your well-known Arthur, and of course, our resident Tyranid expert, Scott Fox. That's right, you get 2 times the Scott for the same price tonight, and a little Arthur thrown in as a cherry on top. Today, we will be talking about, or doing the first installment in our Codex review series, which we're going to be kind of pulling off as the books come out over the next year or two. We are going to put a little bit of a different spin on our Codex reviews. I'm sure you guys are all super used to Codex reviews. Every YouTube channel does them. We will not be doing them in quite the same way. For one, we're looking to be doing our Codex reviews a little after the book comes out. That is to say, it's an actual review, not a preview. And we won't be covering every single little thing in the book. We know that that is a space that is already very covered in the web space. So we won't be breaking down every single data sheet for you or anything like that. I'm sure you guys have great channels to go pick up that stuff on. We're just going to be having a little bit more casual of a talk about some of the big combos, the big competitive lists, the good detachments in each book, what you're going to most likely see at events on the tabletop or in your local leagues, or what your friend wants to run when he wants to crush you like a little bug, or, you know, not to use the term bug offensively in a Tyranids video. But that is kind of what our series is going to be like. We're obviously starting off with Tyranids. We'll be doing a Space Marine one real soon here too. And if you are a regular listener, I want to throw it out there that we would love to have 1 or 2 what we would call a Space Marine experts on the cast with us. So if you're interested, you should reach out to us on Facebook or here on Discord, and maybe you'll be on the cast with us. So, but enough about Space Marines. For today, we're going to be talking all about Tyranids. But, yeah, we got the book right there for you. But before we do that, as always, we're going to jump into just a little hobby catch-up, talk about what we've been working on lately. And as the new guy, why don't we throw it over to Scott Fox first? Scott, what you been working on in your hobby room?
The last 2 weeks I've been getting an Holotide tournament that we just walked through.
Hey, there. We got a, what is this? Is that the Norn?
That is the Norn Emissary. Oh, sorry, no, this one is the Norn Assimilator. The Emissary is the other one. But yeah, they're both pretty cool units. I see people getting we'll get into the weeds on those a little later. So I see some people giving them some flack, but depending on how you use them, they can be really, really efficient.
Yeah.
And then
I've heard some things. Hey, there's his best painted award that he actually just won at Hallowtide just this weekend.
Yeah, that felt so good.
We have
you guys know what it's like. You like pour a ton of effort into something. You're like grinding at it. You say goodbye to the family for a couple of weeks, and you're like, no, can't talk. Or all right, I can go make dinner. Bam, back into the paint booth, and then to see all that kind of like come through at the end, it's like
we honestly have a really talented team of painters on the Trident team. And adding you to that roster of guys who've got some hardware on the shelf for it is just awesome. Well deserved, though. Your NIDs look absolutely amazing.
Thank you very much.
I've been wondering, are Tyranids the Space Marines we wish they were? Are Tyranids the hero we wish Space Marines were? What's the Tyranid of Age of Sigmar? Is this the wrong podcast for me?
I feel kind of a little bit is. I kind of feel like that's Seraphon, right? Like, kind of.
The bugs of it. As far as hobby goes, I have been continuing my exile of Warhammer 40k. I won too much. I have been banned. People said I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of not winning best painteds against Arthur's Beautiful Eldar. People got tired of being shot off the table, so I'm gracefully taking a step back. And I'm playing a much more difficult, much more refined, a more gentleman's game of Age of Sigmar. But all jokes aside, I have been knee-deep in Age of Sigmar painting. So I'm actually putting together a few different tutorials, which you'll be able to catch on our Instagram. So we have... I did a quick, super quick one of how to add like a bit of a warm tone to make your wipes pop. But you can look forward to 2 tutorials coming in the near future. One is on how to make that non-metal metallic gold be easy, because it's not a difficult technique. I firmly believe that anyone can do it. And the other one that you're going to look forward to is how to do some non-metal metallic silver on some weapons. So you can look forward to seeing both of those techniques coming up, and that's been taking up all my hobby time.
I want to get you a t-shirt that says "Too good for 40k."
That's a great idea. And we'll brand it. We'll put Trident on it. All the cool people are playing Sigmar. You know what though? I think that something really cool is happening this next weekend, and we have there's a big team tournament going down. I'm not going to this one, but Scotty here on the bottom. How do we differentiate these two Scots for the podcast for anyone who's listening and not watching? Is it Scotty and Scott? Scott 1 and Scott 2?
Fox. My last name Fox. It's going Fox.
So
Scotty do that in general. We're in a big club with 2 Scots. Just call me Fox full time.
All right. Well, Scott here is going down to a team tournament, so I assume he'll talk about it in just a sec. But most of his hobby time has not been going to hobbying, but been going to being the tactical genius behind Trident's future dominance this next weekend. Scott?
Oh, I'd love if it was some dominance, but we will obviously have a full podcast about our experiences at the WCTC. That's the Western Canadian Team Championship coming up in Saskatoon just this coming weekend, like Arthur mentioned. But yes, we are headed down. That's Bill and I, as well as Ryan and Aiden will be representing Trident. And yes, I have been putting a lot of effort into just trying to do kind of some analysis and some tactical planning beforehand. But I actually do have quite a bit of painting I've been working on as well, because I'm taking Space Marines, and I have hardly, before this last month, played my Space Marines in 10th. So I had to figure them out, and I was messing around with all sorts of lists and stuff, and then the new book dropped, and we've got all these new detachments and stuff. So I've been trying things left, right, and center. I did eventually settle on an army list. They do, have list deadlines for a reason, and I do have some models to get painted up. So I've been working on actually, I think I got them right here. I'm working on a Gravis Captain. He's just getting assembled right now. I've been doing a custom Azrael, who is also kind of work in progress right now. I have a couple of Eliminators that I'm painting. They're not quite around me right now, I don't think. But yeah, I've actually been having quite a bit of Marines to paint. And actually, one thing, a lot of people, I think nowadays, kind of poo-poo painting Space Marines because, like, who hasn't painted a million Space Marines? But every time I stop painting Space Marines for months, see, there you go.
You're probably the only one who's never had that problem.
Yeah, who's every time I stop painting them for a little while and I come back and do some, I'm reminded how much I actually do love painting Space Marines. In fact, I think painting Space Marines might be one of GW's secret sauces for 40k. I do really enjoy it, so it's been nice to get back to them and get some work done there, get some models off the shelf. So that's been good. But like I said, that's Space Marine content, and this is a Tyranids podcast. We'll be hitting lots of Tyranids in Saskatoon by the looks of it, so we'll reference them in our next video to make up for the time lost here. But I don't want to.
Everywhere.
They kind of are. We actually had that at Hallowtide too. I think Tyranids were the most represented faction there. I think there were 6 or 7 of the 28 players that were playing. Literally a quarter of the whole event was Tyranids. You could hardly go a table without seeing them. And they had a pretty good run, led by Scott Fox here, who, in addition to winning Best Painted, finished second in generalship as well. And was this close, not terribly far behind first place, which went to Kieran Trimby. Shout out to Kieran if you're listening. So we'll, like I said, we'll come back to the Tyranids when we get to the recap WCTC podcast. I know one Tyranid list for sure we'll be talking about, no matter how things go, will be Sean Ford. Sean, if you're listening, we're shouting you out. Sean is bringing 260 gaunts to that event. So we will at the very least reference that, because I'm sure that'll be some hilarious stories having to do with that army. But with all that said,
man, someone backs with that.
I know, right? I mean, I'm expecting movement trays. He's got to have movement trays, right? I guess we'll ask him when I see him. All that said, let's jump in. We're going to be doing our like I said, our Codex review of Codex Tyranids. For those of you who've not managed to play Tyranids yet this edition, I don't know how you dodged them, because they got all these beautiful new models and people love their Nids. The Tyranid book has been pretty middle of the pack through, competitively speaking, throughout 10th. There's been a little up and down. Obviously, more of an up since the release of the book, although a lot of people have been very optimistic about the book because it seems to be relatively balanced externally. Despite, in 9th edition, we all got used to this whole cycle where your book came out and immediately your army jumped 15% in win percentage and oftentimes became toxically overpowered, and we had to wait for this cycle of fixing things. And so far, at least, people seem to be pretty happy with the Nids book balance-wise, which is great.
Well, when we look at the Meta Monday results today, Tyranids overall are still only at 47%. But on the Meta Monday, they have win percentages broken down by detachment. That is a new feature for Warhammer 40k 10th edition. We haven't done that prior. That's new to this edition, because a lot of the rules are tied to, obviously, detachments. And in this podcast, we're going to actually review these detachments individually after we review kind of the Codex as a whole. For those of you who want those numbers right now, Tyranids are sitting at a 47% win rate, 48% is the data slate. And the detachments have a variety of different percentages. The worst is the Unending Swarm, the Horde detachment, with a win rate of 38%, so that is not doing well. The Synaptic Nexus is the highest performer with a 50%. And Invasion Fleet and Onslaught are at 44 and 48%. Before we get into the review, do both of you feel those are accurate numbers, or do we need to see 2, 3, 4 more weeks before people get a real big hold of this new book, get a hold of new models, before we can really see what this new book is all about in results?
I think those are pretty accurate, to be honest. I mean, Nids are, depending on what detachment you have, say you're walking into a tournament, they are really dependent on who you're up against. Like, depending on what army you're facing, they kind of will struggle against certain things. Like, if you bring an Unending Swarm up against Knights, I mean, good luck with that. But just to touch on one thing you said a minute ago about how the book has been sitting at about like the 50% mark, just under the 50% mark since it came out. I really appreciate that fact, because nothing's like been radically changed since it got brought in. So I'm able to like dig into the book, try different lists, and then, oh god, that thing I really liked is nuked. Damn, that sucks. Mm-hmm. And that's just something I haven't had to experience yet. And I'm like watching like these Eldar players and Knight players go, oh, we had this really cool thing and now it's gone and life sucks.
Buy a Raid Knight, Scott. You'll play it once every 5 years.
No.
It's kind of true. It's sad but true. This will actually come up. I'll touch on this kind of as we go through these detachments today. But I don't think, or I don't feel like GW's stats are entirely accurate. Or specifically, because I never want to say that stats are inaccurate, but it's clear that like different stats seem to be correlated from different places. Me personally, the place that I go to for my preferred list of 40k stats is the Stat Check website, who get their data off BCP and ITC and whatnot, which, to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure GW does too. They say that they also do some other shenanigans which they don't necessarily reveal, which is fine. But anyway, through StatCheck, they actually do have some different numbers, and some of that we'll actually touch on, like I said, as we go through the attachments today. But it also informed what detachments we're going to look at today, because we actually aren't going to look at 2 of the detachments that are in the NIDS book, not because they're necessarily bad, but because they are very, very rarely played. And that kind of leads into your question there, Arthur, which is, do we have enough info? Listen, again, when it comes to stats, I'll say it again and again and again and again, sample size. Without a good sample size, and 40k is tough because you basically never have good sample sizes. The game takes too long. There's not as many games played as we would all love. But with too small of a sample size, it's really hard to say things about something. And right now there is a very, very small sample size for the Assimilation Swarm detachment. And there's a very, very small sample size for the Crusher Stampede detachment. So we're not going to be covering those today, simply because whilst we can offer opinions on what we see with the rules, again, you can already get those from a million other reviews. Right now we're trying to review what has actually happened and what we've actually experienced, and there's just not much experience to do with those. But the actual stats that I've got for some of these army lists, or detachments I should say, are a little different from what GW says too, and I tend to agree with what I see on StatCheck, but again, I'm just one person. So,
do you agree that Black Templars are the best army in the game? Because according to StatCheck, they're number 1, 58%.
They are incredibly strong. I would argue that they're probably up there, although StatCheck, as you I'm sure are looking at right now, will also show you that the sample size on Black Templars is pretty small compared to something like Eldar.
1/3.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a few less games.
About the same as Votan.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but again, there's also recency and stuff like that. So I do think Black Templars are very strong, though. But damn, those Marines just keep sneaking into every conversation, I tell you. Anyhow, so we're going to quickly cover... Sorry, go ahead, Arthur.
I just wanted to complain about Sisters really quick, but I think this is a Tyranid podcast, and I will...
It is.
No
more power armor. No
I'm
more
sorry.
power armor. We'll do a Sisters cast. How about that?
That'd be super quick.
No, I'm sure you could go on for a while, actually.
So, if I'm not mistaken, though, we are going to talk about kind of an overview of the new book. Is that where you wanted to go next with this?
Well, specifically, I just wanted to reference one thing, just for people who aren't familiar. Just touch on the Tyranid actual army rules. So first off, they've got 2. They have Synapse, which is just a 6-inch aura that comes off of all of their Synapse creatures, which of course is a tagline or a keyword that they have on their units. It allows the units that are within...
Not to be confused with the faction word. Every unit in there has a faction word listed as Synapse, and this has caused so much confusion amongst Tyranid players, because they're like, oh, anybody that's Synapse gets this ability, and they look and they see under their thing, it says Synapse. Everything has that, and I've encountered probably 5 new Tyranid players that are like thinking everything in the army has Synapse, and I'm like, no.
Right.
Scroll to the bottom and look there.
I think I'm contributing to that right now, because I did say keyword. You're looking at the Synapse ability keyword. Mm-hmm. Like it would pop up kind of in the top right of your data sheet when you're looking. Anyway, any unit or Tyranid unit within that aura gets to take Battle Shock and Leadership tests on 3d6, which is quite good, especially since Tyranids do have comically low leadership values, which kind of hurts them pretty bad when they're out of Synapse range. The second, and often both maligned and loved ability of the Tyranid army is the Shadow and the Warp, which, Scott Fox, I believe it's once per game that you can use.
Once per game. You get to drop it on your command phase or on your opponent's command phase. And it sends out an army-wide Battle Shock test for any units that are on the field at that time. And they have to be on the field. They can't be like in reserves or in some way not on the field.
And this just, baseline, this just enforces a regular Battle Shock, basically, if they fail.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's ways to expand on that a little bit. Like, well, first off, just to touch on the whole Shadow and the Warp thing. When it first dropped, the whole Tyranid community was like, oh, wow, Battle Shock. Yeah. And everyone was like, wow, this really sucks. And it's not until, like, these books are coming out that we're starting to see, like, how Battle Shock is actually going to play a role in the greater part of the game. And now that the Tyranids book out, we're seeing all these different tools for manipulating Battle Shock and diving a little deeper into that style of gameplay. There's like entire lists out there dedicated towards like forcing Battle Shock tests, which is pretty awesome. And some of the units that are out there are really potent when it comes to that. So in order to like help enforce that battle shock, you can take like a Neuro Tyrant. He gives that roll a +1. So if you was normally saving a 7, now you save on an 8, and all of a sudden all these Necron armies are going, oh boy.
Yeah. Yep.
And if anybody is within, I think it's 6 inches of a Death Leaper, they're at a -1 leadership as well. So they're all like at, adjusting their roll by 2 now. So it's
yeah. And I know I think there's 1 or 2 enhancements that can deal a little bit extra mortal wounds or some other negatives there in there too. So that's why I said it's both a maligned and loved ability. It seems like most Battleshock related effects, at least early intent, were basically written off. But as time is kind of going on, more and more people are grappling with, well, actually this might be a playable mechanic.
It really is. It's a game changer on a couple levels, because it can really adjust your effectiveness on the field or part of the field. It can, knowing where your battle shocks, like especially on the Shadow of the Warp phase, if you're going like, okay, the units over here are battle shocked and the units over here are not. If I have a Neurolictor in range of these guys during my turn, I'm going to get +1 to wound those guys. So seeing where you have battle shocks around the board, you can all of a sudden surge in that direction and try to dominate that area of the table, right? Absolutely. And the biggest part of the whole thing isn't necessarily how effective you are at taking out an enemy unit. It is, I found, battle shocking for OC control of objectives. The number of times battle shock has flipped the points of a game for me in a round. Like, oh, you were scoring 15 on primaries, now you're scoring 0, and I'll take those primaries on my round, because you're still OC 0 until your next command phase. So
just until the start of their next command phase. Just being able to flip an objective in a timely manner, for sure. I want to touch on those because it's relevant to all of the following detachments. This is something that's available to all of them. Some of them lean into it more, some less so, but just keep that in mind when we're talking about them. So for our first detachment that we're going to be talking about, we are going to be talking about the one that you guys have all seen and played against since the start of 10th, the Invasion Fleet detachment. Kind of, I guess, what would be considered the standard right now, even though it's just 1 of 6 now that it's in the book. This is the one that there's been the most run with. I know, Scott, you've probably played this one the most, obviously. Most people have played against this one the most, and honestly, it is still a pretty good detachment. Even with the new ones out. Arthur, I don't know if you got stat check open there, but you can double check on the win rate for us. I'm pretty sure that it was either first or second as far as win rate among the 4 that we were talking about, and that it was probably somewhere in the low 50s, 51, 52%.
Invasion Fleet is at 48%. Editing Swarm is actually beating it on stat check at 48 as well. Assimilation's at 52, and Vanguard's at 53.
Okay, so there you have it. The detachment ability for the Invasion Fleet is called Hyper Adaptations. It allows the Tyranid player to choose one ability at the start of the game. Am I right, Scott?
Yeah, start of round 1.
Yep, and you get basically sustained hits, lethal hits, or precision on critical wounds, army-wide, basically. And that's in melee only, though, right?
No, that's everything.
Oh, it's everything. Look at that. It's even better.
Shooting doesn't matter. Yep.
There you have it. So it's actually like, I think part of the charm of this one is the flexibility. You can kind of lean in whichever way you need. If you're obviously up against kind of more monster mash or vehicle heavy lists, you probably want the lethal hits. There's a few armies that are, of course, very vulnerable to having their leaders lost because they give a lot of buffs, so precision can be good there. Sustained hits is good pretty much in most situations. If one of those
and the precision is also on the critical hits, not even the wounds.
Oh, so it's even better than that.
And you can do things to give you crits on 5s. So
right,
crits on 5s with that, all of a sudden, bye leaders.
So yeah, and that kind of leads us into the stratagems for this one, right? Because that's one of the stratagems is being able to crit on 5s, right?
Yeah. Yes, you can. So in all these attachments, like you'll get 1 or 2 strats that kind of suck, and 1 or 2 that are you kind of can't live without them. Just to touch on the nature of Invasion Fleet, when it came out, some of the rules are pretty cool. Like you could find yourself, no matter what you're facing, you could sort of fight it. Right? It was a really good, fight anybody sort of detachment. Right? You could punch up against knights, and you could handle swarms. So whatever way you wanted to roll, right? But one thing it really lacked was flavor. Like everything you had was, how well can I hit the thing? And it did good at hitting things. It was okay, but it just didn't really have any kind of flavor to it. If you're wanting like a really fun kind of interesting, do things on the table kind of thing.
Well, that's kind of what I was. That's kind of what I was seeing when I was looking through the rules for it, was that really for Invasion Fleet, it doesn't necessarily benefit any specific subsection of units more than others. Its best set of units are basically just whoever's good in a Tyranid army at that particular point. And its tools, as far as like stratagems and enhancements and stuff go, mostly seem to lean in that too. It's a very generalist set of tools. There's a stratagem for Feel No Pain. There's a stratagem, like we talked about, for criticals on 5s. There's a stratagem for getting a little extra movement with Consolidate, or especially, actually, that one's quite strong. I should touch on that. Stratagem to actually allow you to make a normal move instead of a Consolidate if there's nothing within range of you, which is very strong, because it means that you can, of course, use it to get... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, it also leans into the Endless Swarm side of things, right? Like, you can also take a bit of a Swarm army with this, too, so it touched on a lot of different things. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like a Fight on Death stratagem, which is pretty handy for all of your combat units and things like that. So it is just a generalist kind of bag of tools, which is probably why it got picked as the Tyranid's original detachment. I would say, just off the top of my head, and you guys can let me know what you think, but I'm guessing if you're a new Tyranid player who doesn't entirely know what you want to play, this would probably be where you'd go. Obviously, once you've got an idea of what kind of army really works for you, and maybe you do that right from the start, there are definitely some better detachments. But this one, the generalist kind of take is better.
Yeah. The one downside, the real downside of the list is if you are fighting any kind of skewed list that's like taking lots of one thing, this attachment works really good because you can gear everything in your army towards fighting that one thing. But if you're fighting like a really balanced... 50% vehicles, a whole lot of infantry, and a fair amount of leaders, then you're really having to... Your entire army faction is only good against like a third of what you could be doing. Luckily, one of the strats is during the command phase, you can stack another one on top of that, so you can have your sustained hits. And this guy over here will have lethal.
Yeah.
So you can punch up against those things, but it goes against your CP efficiency.
I think most folks who've played enough 10th have really begun to learn what the incredible power of sustained and lethal is like, especially sustained and lethal on a 5-up. Half the strongest combos in the game seem to be focused around that.
They don't let you do it to the same things. It is sustained only on infantry and lethal only on vehicles. But it lets you branch out from the one selected hyper adaptation that you've picked, that army, for that game.
For that game.
So you can reach out of that, do a little bit for the other thing, but CP.
Right. Well, exactly, right. For the enhancements, again, it's fairly generalist. We've got some kind of minor buffs for a single model, like Feel No Pain 5+, which actually goes to a 4+, if they've lost any wounds, which is quite good, as well as some reroll one, just about any die per turn for a unit. Both of those are handy for some of your bigger monsters, of course. You also have, though, a synapse range increase that you can throw on one unit if you need a little extra range. And the one that's probably used the most, the Alien Cunning, which is allowing up to 3 units to redeploy. I'm not sure, Scott, is this one, the Alien Cunning enhancement, is it one of those ones that says after the first turn roll, or is it just a generic one?
It's before the roll.
Okay, so not quite the strongest version of that, but...
But it's still really good, depending on the kind of deployment you have. It dictates whether or not that'll come in handy. If you're on like a narrow board deployment, there's only so much you can do. One thing you can do, though, is throw them into strat reserves, which is going to be super handy. If you're on a Dawn of War style board, you can like deploy stuff heavy to the flanks, see where they're going to deploy, and then go, I'm going to grab those 3 things I put on this side, jump them all to the other side, and like do like a heavy flank assault and leave half his stuff out of range. I've done that a few times, and it's pretty good when they fall for it.
I'm pretty sure that like redeploys are strong no matter what. obviously the ones that come after first turn are stronger, but this is, like I said, Alien Cunning shows up in lots and lots of Tyranids lists over the last couple of months anyway, because redeploys are always just amazing. So like I said,
one of the other sorry, go on.
No.
I was going to say one of the other detachments we're going to do has a after the roll redeploy.
Absolutely.
That's the Vanguard.
In fact, it's the one we're going to be doing next. And like I said, that's kind of your rundown of the invasion plate. Like I said, this is by far the most common thing that people have seen for the past few months. But it's the least exciting because, of course, it's not brand new like the other ones are. The one that has made the most waves and made a lot of waves, even from like the previews that I saw some other creators do, and that I see popping up in lots of message boards and stuff, is our next one on the list, and the one I think Scott Fox will be most happy to talk about because I know he's been playing it lately, and that is the Vanguard Onslaught. And as Arthur pointed out earlier, the Vanguard Onslaught is doing very well competitively. I think it's also getting quite a few games played because it is appealing to a lot of folks. But I'm going to kind of turn this one right to you, Scott, and let you kind of lead us through this section, because I know that this is what you've been working on. Give us a rundown just kind of on the basic detachment rule, and then, you know, touch on a few stratagems and enhancements that are quite common, and let us know what kind of units are most commonly showing up in this army, because the rest of these detachments, that's kind of the jam, is that they work for a specific subset of units, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vanguard Onslaught is primarily dealing with a subset of units called Vanguard Invader units. And these units are basically anything with wings, except for the Harridan and the Titanic stuff. But the Winged Hive Tyrant, the Winged Tyranid Prime, Gargoyles, as well as your sneakier stuff like your Lictor, Death Leaper, Neurolictor, and I believe the Gene Sealers as well. Those are all Vanguard Assault. And this is a really fun list to play. It gives you all kind of a big toolbox of options to enjoy the game in a way that Tyranid players have never had the chance to play the game. Right? In 9th edition, everything was always like, we can move really fast or we can like kill shit really hard. Yeah. And that was sort of like the main two ways you could kind of like jank your list, right? In this, we're part Grey Knights, because we can like start jumping around the board in interesting places. We can do all this like crazy stuff so everyone playing Tyranids is like, I can do what?
Yeah, I've kind of that's what I've kind of been hearing and seeing, is that this is probably the most flexible list in terms not just of movement but of redeployment and being able to get your models where you want them to go, and that's probably the secret to its power too.
Yeah. So getting right into it, the core abilities of the faction is that all units have fallback and charge. That's everybody in the game. Everybody in your army will have fallback and charge. Anybody that has the Vanguard Intruder keyword will also have advance and charge on top of that. So it's a little weird because a lot of your Vanguard units aren't necessarily the fightier ones. So advance and charge, it's there when you need it. Like if you see the enemy has some guy, small unit off the side doing the thing, it's easy to get over there and like handle that unit. But I haven't really used it in an effective way to like really dominate anything. Just picking out smaller things with that. The fallback and charge, always handy, of course.
Incredibly.
One of the big, if we just jump right into like enhancements and such, what was that called here? The Neuro Node. It's the redeploy. Now you get to pick any 3 invader units, the invader keyworded units, and you get to redeploy them after the roll. And this has so much potential for doing like weird, janky stuff. So you take Von Ryan Leapers. That's another Vanguard unit, for example, and they have Infiltrate as an ability, right? So you drop them 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone, and you string them out. And all of a sudden, you've created a wall. And then you do that a couple times, and you have all these units out in the middle of the board. And you go first. they move up and they can choose to attack or just stand there and like act like a big wall, screen your opponent in the deployment zone round one. And if you lose the initiative, pull them back behind cover, do whatever else you want to do, and throw in reserves, however you want to do it.
I guess the real power of this is that you get to choose after
exactly
who's going first.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and sorry, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, in Magic terms, we would call this strictly better, because it's interesting because it's actually also enhancement, just like in Alien Cunning in the Invasion Fleet is. They even cost the same number of points. So it's really just the exact same enhancement, but better in a slightly different or a very different detachment.
Do you think that as more codexes come out, we'll see more of this, where we go back to redeploys happening after you have that knowledge? So like, does that imply that what they did for redeploys with the Dawn of 10th was just like an error? Like they didn't really know what they were doing, like an oopsies? Or is this like it's purposeful that they want to create different versions of this redeploy?
I think sorry.
From what I've seen, they actually seem to still be putting out both. But what I'm seeing is that redeploys that happen before the roll-off seem to be more ubiquitous in who you can redeploy. You can usually pick anybody, whereas the ones that happen after the first turn roll usually have a subset of units that you can specifically pick. And I think that that's a great way to differentiate the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another good one is called Hunting Grounds. It's an enhancement you can take on anytime someone brings a unit in from reserve or deep strike. You roll a d6 on a 2 up. They have to make a battle shock test. So them coming onto the table is all of a sudden a risky proposition, especially when now you have all these tools to take advantage of battle shock.
Well, it's kind of a bit of interesting anti-tech too, because like, what kind of armies is that good against? This is the type of thing that's good against another Vanguard Onslaught.
It's good against any kind of unit or any kind of army that does that jank where they have a 3-inch drop in to grab an objective, and all of a sudden they're OC 0 and they're like, oh, it didn't work.
Well, in any army that's bouncing in and out of reserves, Grey Knights, the new Vanguard spearhead for an army we said we wouldn't talk about anymore. Obviously, your Vanguard Onslaught. There's a couple, and it's becoming more of a thing against Calidus Assassins, things like that. It's becoming more of a thing to have detachments and armies that can do a lot of reserve shenanigans, and that is, like you said, very good to get some cheeky battle shocks off on them.
Yeah. There's a few really good strats in this list as well. Right. A couple of strats that I rely on. What's it called again here? I rely on it. What's it called? It was called Seated Broods. So if you have some invader units in your reserves, like in Deep Strike or whatever, you can bring them onto the table one round earlier than the typical rules allow you to bring them on at the time, right? So if you have a unit that can deep strike, they can deep strike round 1. If you have something that can walk onto the table, they can walk into your enemy's deployment zone round 2. And that's really awesome, because remember what I said about the Von Ryan Leaper wall, right? Yeah. Say you don't take the Von Ryan Leapers, but you have a couple of units of gargoyles. All of a sudden, round 1, you get the initiative. I'm going to deep strike them 9 inches in front of you. They shoot and then move 6 inches forward and create a wall 3 inches away from you, again blocking you in your deployment zone. So we have like all these different ways of move blocking you early in the game. Yeah. And the ability to bring in something round 2 into your backline, super useful. I've used that a few times now, using like big crunchy units and just sticking them in the back, and they're like blowing stuff up while you're fighting a 2-front war all of a sudden.
Well, and I think we talked a little bit about this, Scott, when we played a couple of weeks ago. But Vanguard Onslaught seems best positioned to make use of just the hilarious amount of movement control that Tyranids can do. Because of strats like that, you back that up then with things like Spore Mines to shut down advances, Barb Gaunts to slow down key units and stuff. And especially for like those aggro type armies, some of which are doing very good right now, like Chaos Space Marines. I, again, don't have stat check right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure their win rate's pretty high right now. if you throw down, like you said, some gargoyles right in front of a few of their units, you throw some spore mines, to the flanks, like you could ruin their game turn one because they can't get out.
They're in third place with a 56% win rate.
Yeah, there you go. So this is relevant.
Yeah. Of course, it only works if your opponent doesn't use like a lot of flying stuff. They can just fly right over you, right?
Some people don't get the choice.
Matchup dependent.
What he's saying, Arthur, is he wants me to play Blood Angels again.
Well, if you're wondering, Blood Angels have the world's worst. They are the bottom army. Period.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Yeah, I did. We said we weren't talking about Marines, and that just makes me sad. So we're definitely not talking about that.
I think Black Templars are the Blood Angels that you wish they were.
God.
I know this is not a Marine podcast, but why the fuck is there a 18% different win rate between Black Templars and Blood Angels?
You know what? We're going to talk about that during our Codex Space Marine review. So tune in for that, Arthur.
Another couple useful strats out of the Vanguard Onslaught is Invisible Hunter, where you can transport a unit of infantry. And when I played you, Scotty, I completely forgot this existed. Remember, I had that big unit of 6 zone throbes on my backline that couldn't make it up to fight on that objective we were fighting for the win. Yep. Yeah, I had a strat, like 3 or 4 CP sitting there I couldn't use, and I totally forgot I had that, and I could have had that zone thrope unit up there causing some mayhem. So anyway, things like a group of zone throbes for our army or whatever that you want to be able to move around the table, that is there for you to redeploy them again around the table.
Yeah.
And then there's Surprise Assault, which is an interesting one. Again, it's another one where you're forcing a battle shock test. You'll notice an interesting thing about this. The target is one Vanguard Invader unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight. And then he looks and sees who he can hit around the battlefield. And it's basically just any unit. It's not restricted by a range or visibility, I think, right? So it's like, you can, if that unit, if your unit you're choosing attacks that unit, he gets a bonus. But it doesn't have to be him attacking it. He can pick a unit in your deployment zone that's camping on your home objective and make them take a battle shock test, even when they're out of sight of anything else. Yeah. So it's
like the battle shock itself isn't, attached to anything. It's just that part's free, and then if you can attack them, good for you. But whatever.
Exactly. But you can just like broadcast a battle shock to where you need it on the table whenever you need it, and that is
that could be quite strong, actually. Yeah. And I know, like, the movement shenanigans really do not, like, they're bottomless with this list. I know that they also have, the kind of phantasm-like stratagem where, where if an enemy moves within 9 inches of one of your units, you can make a normal move. That's always a very powerful ability. And they have the ability it's a stratagem to basically turn a unit, like, I think it's any unit, but maybe it's keyworded, into a lone op for a turn where you can't target them except outside 12 inches.
You get to pick any Vanguard Invader unit and make them lone operative.
Yeah.
And if you are picking, you get to pick, any Vanguard Invader becomes a lone operative. Anybody that has lone operative already gets lone operative 6 inches rather than 12 inches.
Oh, wow. Like, that's really, really tough.
It's amazing. Say you have a Death Leaper camping on an objective and they deep strike, they're 9 inches away and they want to shoot him and you're like, no.
No, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shuts that down.
Yikes. So, like really, the shenanigans are maximized in this army.
It's so much fun.
And yet the killing power is still there. But, like, Tyranids in general aren't super hard up for killing power. But, it's this one's really leaning into the shenanigans part of things.
The killing power is there with some of the things, right? You're not taking this attachment because you want to be able to kill a lot of things. In this attachment, you're going to take a few things that aren't related to this type of attachment for their ability to kill stuff, and that's just nature to the Tyranids. So you'll typically see a couple Exocrines, a couple Maliceptors, things of that nature in this list. One thing you'll see commonly in other lists that you won't see in this list is a lot of Hive Tyrants. You might see a Winged Hive Tyrant. You don't see them much because they're not as good and a few reasons. But yeah, but in this one here, Winged Hive Tyrants do have that Vanguard keyword. So you can drop a Winged Hive Tyrant in your enemy's deployment zone round 2, which is pretty cool. One thing you can do is... correct me if I'm wrong. If a leader has Deep Strike and he's attached to a unit, does that unit get Deep Strike?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so as well. I think only if the unit also has Deep Strike.
Every model in the unit has to have it, I believe. So.
All right, cool. All right. I was wondering about that. I was going to try something. I figured I'd ask you guys. All right. Anyway. So yeah, you're still taking other stuff that does the killing. This is more like board control, moving stuff around. If you team this up with some barb gaunts and spore mines, you're really kind of screwing people's movement up.
Yeah, well, then like I said, there's a reason I think why this has probably been the most, the winningest and one of the most popular detachments from the book. Again, though, I do want to point out, like, the gap between this particular detachment and some of the other ones is not huge, and maybe that will change over the time. As Arthur pointed out earlier, like, it's only been so long since the book came out, but it is cool to see that this is an option, and I think for the board control type player, this is your way to go with Tyranids. Yep. Moving along, we have 2 more we want to cover here. This next detachment actually made a lot of waves in the chatter before the launch of the book, and a lot of folks did think that it would really be standing out in a competitive sense, and reading the rules, I can understand why. So it's interesting to me that it actually isn't necessarily doing that well, even though it is getting played reasonably well. And I know for sure that it has won at least one event, and that is the Synaptic Nexus, which is a really cool detachment, which obviously focuses on what you would expect, the Synapse units, and gives you some pretty powerful buffs that come off the Synapse units, which you kind of want to have anyway, obviously, as we talked about Synapse at the start here, and how important that is to the army.
I think it's this detachment that reminds me the most of the last book, like the 9th edition Codex, where you got to kind of choose, and then you'd have a series of Synapse benefits every turn, which is similar.
Yeah, it's basically Marine Doctrines in this game.
Yeah, I think that's kind of definitely inspired. I mean, even some of the language they use seems very inspired from the 9th edition book, with these synaptic imperatives, right? Which, of course, your Tyranid players will be familiar with. Nowadays, you only get 3 to choose from, but you get to pick them at the start of the battle round. So these are, like Scott said, a lot like combat doctrines, and many other armies have rules like this now. You get to pick them. They come off in an aura, they come off your Synapse units, and they benefit any Tyranids that happen to be in range. There's 3 of them. One of them is for a 5+ invulnerable save, which is usually spectacular. One of them is for an extra inch to your advance and charge moves, and the final one is for +1 to hit in melee. So 3 honestly pretty powerful buffs. Again, as with all battle round triggered abilities, you do have to have a sense of timing. You need to have a game plan about, when you're going to want and need these and use them. But they are quite strong. And I think that probably was a big part of why people figured that this particular detachment would be doing fairly well. Arthur, what is the win rate on a Synaptic Nexus right now?
Well, again, the caveat that, do we want to use Stat Check, or do we want to use Meta Monday, or do we want to use the data that GW uses, which is their own tournaments?
Give us Stat Check and give us GW. I want to know what the difference is.
Oh, I don't have the GW data. I can give you Stat Check, though. According to Stat Check, the Tyranids, Assimilation Swarm?
A Synaptic Nexus.
Is at 42%. It is the second worst one in Stat Check.
And I think that GW was saying it was actually the highest winning percent, if I remember. So that is quite the difference, and makes you really wonder where the two are drawing their information from. But that also tells you that, it, like I said, sample size is still pretty small right now. So whether or not this is a competitively viable detachment is probably still very much up in the air. But we can talk a little bit more about it itself and how it plays a bit. Scott, have you had a chance to play this particular detachment yet?
Yeah, it's the detachment I played at Hallowtide.
Oh, well, so you got 3 very recent games.
Yeah, it works. It works well. There's things that you want to do in this list that give you a toolbox of survivability and punch power. So yeah, like you were saying a minute ago, like it really leans into models that you already want on the table. Like your synapse units are typically ones that you need anyway because you don't want to be, failing your battle shock tests. And a lot of them are just really good to begin with, like your Hive Tyrants, your Maleceptors, your Zoanthropes, like so many good units, your Norn Emissary, Norn Assimilator, all these good units are already synapse units. And this just makes them better. It's like, we're going to take all this awesome stuff and just have more fun with these awesome things. And I think the win rate should be a higher on this one because it provides a really good toolbox. Now, like in the Invasion Fleet, you have a strat that gives you that 5-up feel no pain. In this one here, you have a strat that gives you Armor of Contempt, which is pretty cool, and that can be used in the shoot phase or fight phase. So all of a sudden, you're not just taking a feel no pain, you're like stopping those wounds from coming in the first place, which I appreciate.
Well, and like in Space Marines, can tell you AOC on something that already has a 2+ armor save is always bonkers good.
Yeah, and the fact that they left it as a battle tactic means if you're within 12 inches of a Hive Tyrant, you can do it on 2 different units, which I appreciate. Now, a couple of the strats that you're going to see used most often with this units or with this attachment are Irresistible Will and Reinforced Hive Node. Irresistible Will, if there's like a thing that you need to kill on the table, you're like, I really need to get this thing moved. You pick a synapse creature, pick its opponent, and it's basically like a baby version of Oath of Moment. You get to reroll once to hit and once to wound, and anything that's within 6 inches of your synapse unit that you use that on gets all of that. So you have a lot of things rerolling once to hit and once to wound.
Yep.
And a lot of these units are already going to be hitting on 2s, right? So if you have like a Norn Emissary and a Maleceptor, there hits on 3, so it's going to drop to 2s and everything. So it just makes that all super reliable.
Yes.
Right? And then, of course, Reinforced Hive Node. That was the Armor of Contempt one. Also Battle Shock. The Irresistible Will one is a Battle Shock. The only other Battle Shock one is okay. It bumps your synapse up to 9 inches rather than 6, but again, if you're already in a big synapse army, not that crazy good.
I think that one kind of it lets you pick a unit in 9 and they just count as in synapse. So I guess if you're gonna like really missile a unit across the table and you can't synapse it, maybe that's what you do.
Yeah. Another one here is called the Smothering Shadow, and it's a pretty cool like little hand grenade. If you are close to a unit that fails a battle shock test, you can be like, I'm gonna roll 6d6 and 3 up as a mortal wound. So if you have an enemy that's like got 2 or 3 wounds left, you're like, I just want that guy gone. Bye-bye.
Little kind of a mini Doombolt often, almost. I think this is one of the, I could be wrong, but I believe that this is one of the detachments that also has a stratagem for some fallback shenanigans. Like they can fall back and still shoot and charge, I think.
Yes. It's called Override Instincts. It's anybody that's within synapse range. It doesn't even have to be a synapse creature, just someone that's in synapse range. And they're eligible to shoot and declare a charge.
See,
after doing a fallback.
And that's one of the most, like, we talked about it a little bit earlier, too. That really is one of the most underrated abilities in the game. There's so many times that come up in a game where you just need to get something out of combat and somewhere else. That's where that comes in. Just a great tool to have in your toolkit.
Yeah. And 2 of the enhancements are good. The others are okay-ish. The only good ones I would say are Snap to Control. It's a 1 damage reduction. So if you have a Hive Tyrant that is handing out all these like free strats, always useful. And Power of the Hive Mind is okay. You throw that on a what did I throw that on? My Neuro Tyrant. It makes his weapon actually kind of useful.
Oh, okay. It's a
flamer weapon. It natively has AP1, I think 2 damage. Now it's AP2, 2 damage.
Oh, I see. So it boosts it boosts the strength and AP of their psychic weapons. Is that it?
Strength and AP, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
could be probably handy on like a Maliceptor too, just to get the AP up a little more, potentially. It's a fairly cheap upgrade, right?
Yeah, if you could give it to a Maliceptor, it can only go to the characters. A Maliceptor is not a character, right?
Obviously, that would be a good spot, but I don't know the book well enough.
If you want to come over sometime, I'll try and play 40k.
Anytime I get invited places, it's all for AOS now, so I actually really love that particular invite. So maybe I'll take you up on that.
Scotty, nobody wants to play AOS against you.
Well, you're probably not. I probably should
that
go.
game for us too.
It's me. I'm the one who's the problem. I see how it is.
So you remember how the other day we completely missed doing this? I happened to be with Arthur playing AOS when I should have been doing this podcast with you, and AOS got all up in your grill again. Sorry.
You know what? It's just such a fantastic game. Time flies by so far, you can't even recognize what's going on. I have a question for you. The Psychostatic Disruption, the 30-point enhancement, it lets people not get set up in reserve within 12 inches and once per battle. And it says during the first or second battle round, but let's be real, it's on the second battle round. On a 4-up, they can't arrive. Yep. Do you ever take that? Is that ever worth it?
Typically, no. I've only played this attachment a couple times, but I've never had to use that. I find that I can get enough screening stuff out there to begin with, and if there's like a pocket of area I think they can get into, I'll be okay. I'll drop a Spore Mine in there because now Spore Mines give the 9-inch bubble, where in 9th they didn't. So it's like, I got that pocket, Spore Mine it, I got it covered.
I kind of agree. So, like, the reason I think you take this is for the deep strike denial within 12, or the reserve denial within 12 inches, which is a very powerful ability. However, I think that it's just kind of one of those cases where Tyranids are not the army for it, because this is an army that already screens so well. They put a lot of units on the table. They tend to have a lot of models. Of course, they can spawn new ones all the time. Spore Mines are an excellent example. So for them in general, screening is less of a problem. Now, in some other armies, this would be an auto take to get that deep strike denial or reserve denial. And maybe you screw over somebody's reserve coming in, like you said. It's a die roll. It's a 4+, and you can prevent once per game. You can prevent somebody's reserve from coming in when it's trying to come in. But 4+ rolls, we know they're fickle. That's not really why you take it. You take it for the 12-inch denial. It is good, but I don't know if this is the army for it. It is interesting, the fourth and final enhancement here, because Scott was mentioning this kind of earlier, that comes with this is actually another aura, which reduces leadership within a certain range. I think it's 9 inches from the bearer. So if you really want to get wild with Shadow in the Warp, this is one more way to do it.
Yep. A good one to give that to is something like the what's it called there? The Parasite of Mortrex. Yes. Or if you have like a monster, like the Parasite of Mortrex can be like, he's going to lone operative, hang out 12 inches away, and then when you need him, you can zoom in, drop that leadership down, and then on the start of your next turn, I'm going to Shadow in the Warp you. So I can like set that up on my turn so that I know when that Shadow in the Warp's going to drop, and I'll just target those units. And you can't touch him because he's lone operative. So it's a good one to have that on. Yeah,
I'm really fascinated by the incoming Battle Shock meta. It's making me happy. It's making me happy for Chaos Knights too. But
did I tell you about Neurolictors yet?
You mentioned them briefly there. You know what? Actually, let's briefly talk a little bit about Neurolictors, because they are one of the new models, and they are actually really relevant to this army. They're relevant to the Vanguard Swarm as well. They're actually kind of relevant all the time, but they fit specifically in a few armies. But hit us off on the Neurolictor, just because people are going to be seeing those things all over the place.
Yeah. You're going to see, if people can find one, they're going to have basically 2 in each list, maybe 3. Yeah. They're so good. So at the start of my command phase, every command phase, I get to pick any one unit that is within 12 inches of them and force a Battle Shock test. If I have 3 of them, I'm forcing 3 Battle Shock tests on my command phase. Already pretty good. And on top of that, any unit that is Battle Shocked and within 12 inches of them, and that could be like
a lot.
They can have 4 units within 12 inches, and they all get a -1 to hit, and I get a +1 to wound.
Yeah.
So if I have 3 of these things on the table, that's a giant bubble on the middle of the table where you really don't want to be battle shocked. And I'm always battle shocking you. They don't stop.
Well, and this is a model that, it's got the Lictor more or less the same stat line, which aren't incredibly tough. However, Neurolictors are both A, lone ops, and B, have a 4+ invulnerable save. So they aren't that easy to just get rid of.
And stealth.
So, like...
If I was to ask you how much that costs, how much do you think the Neurolictor costs?
I can tell you, like, for what it does... I can tell you, I think it should cost about 100 points. 110, maybe.
Do you think lone operators, like as a tech piece, should be about the 100-point range?
Yeah, these are 65 points.
Yeah, they're very, very affordable.
Well, like, we can expect that's going to go up.
Probably.
everyone's taken like 2 or 3 of them. If you can find them.
It seems like the thing that GW loves to do is like percentage scale increases. And it doesn't seem like they just want to throw a slap like a 7. If they say 5% and 5% is 7 points, they're never going to throw a 7-point increase. No, it's always in 5s or 10s, right?
Yeah.
And you can actually see like what they do. A lot of they love their 10% downs. Oh, these are underperforming, 10%. Which seems like nothing on a small thing, but on like tank, that's at 200 points. Like, 20 points here actually does add quite a bit, which might explain, not the podcast for it, Sister's increased win rate. When you look at a 65-point model, and they're like, wow, this is overperforming, we're going to hit it with a 10% increase, that's only 71. So we're going to look at that 20. Well, that's 12 points. Maybe they're going to look at 15 points. And I think the real price of your Neurolictor will probably end up being around 80. Maybe.
Still worth taking 2.
Yeah. To be honest with you, Arthur, though, to your point, yeah, I do think that lone ops, I do think they should be around 100 points, and I think the ones, like the Neurolictor is kind of interesting because, of course, he is quite a bit tougher than a lot of lone ops are. A lot of lone ops are toughness 3 or 4 models with like 4 or 5 wounds and probably mediocre saves. They really do need lone op to survive. Which the Neurolictor doesn't necessarily. But I do think that we should just be then making lone ops good enough, strong enough in their abilities or their stats or whatever to still justify like 100-point cost. Because the reality is that the lone op ability is worth that much because you have this unit that can't be interacted with, save for if you're very close to it. And the prevalence of lone ops in so many armies is obvious. So I also... Again, we'll have a different discussion another time about this. I don't think lone ops should work the way it does. I really don't like it. We've talked about that a bit in past podcasts. But I don't know that it's going to change. I think GW likes the mechanic, and so we should just learn to make it work within the system.
We should add the fact it's also an infiltrator.
Yeah, and he's fast too, right? Like 8 to 10 inch move.
Yeah, 8-inch move, 4 up invul, 7 wounds.
And I mean, he doesn't need to do much. So the main thing he wants to do is just get in range of stuff. He can advance. And so you get a bunch of these things suddenly in the midst of your army right when the Tyranids want to hammer you, and life can get pretty tough.
And his weapon is precision. If he happens to kill a character, you get a CP too.
It's just kind of one of those data sheets that doesn't quit.
Right?
We do have one more detachment to cover. One that this is the one that I am most interested in and I think is the most fun. This was my take or my choice for what would be the most powerful detachment in the book. It hasn't come out that way, at least not yet, but it is making a little bit of a renaissance this last week or two, and that is the Unending Swarm. This is how I remember the Tyranids of my youth, very focused on swarm type play. My buddy coincidentally also named Scotty K, if you're listening in. Scott Solidarity forever. He played when Turvagons first came out. He played the hell out of Gaunt Swarm lists and stuff like that, and that's how I romanticize Tyranids of the past. This is a very interesting detachment as well. Obviously, it is entirely focused on the swarm units. Gaunts, Hormagaunts, Gargoyles. I don't know if Rippers have the Endless Swarm tag or not.
Rippers are Harvester keyworded. So Rippers will lean into the Assimilation Swarm.
I think there is one more. Oh, Neurogaunts, of course. I'm like, there's another one. There's a new type of Gaunt, Neurogaunts, who are also endless. This army, its detachment mechanic is maybe most familiar to World Eater players because it matches the 9th edition World Eater rules with what is called in this detachment a surge move, which is basically when the unit is shot at and suffers at least one casualty, it is then allowed to make an additional move, which is d6 inches towards the closest enemy, and it does have to be towards the closest enemy, but you can move directly into combat even if you'd like. And of course, because this is Gaunts we're talking about, they tend to lose a model to a stiff breeze. So the ability to proc this is very easy, and you can very easily move a ridiculous carpet of little bugs right up into your opponent's face. Scott, have
and
you
it's
had a
not
chance to
even
play
once
this?
per turn.
No,
it's not even once per turn. It's like that unit gets shot twice that phase. They keep moving until he's in engagement with somebody and you can't shoot them anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly, right?
So I played a small game of this. I don't have enough models to play a full 2,000 point, right? Really lead into it. It's going to give you a sore back to play a long game of this one. You'll be moving models everywhere. So it's all I'm going to come at you and you're not going to stop me. You'll have to kill me to stop me kind of vibe. Out of all the attachments, this one is Starship Troopers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all the bugs, carpet of them, and so you got some like awesome movement in this. On top of that, you look at some gargoyles. The gargoyles natively move 12 inches. They shoot and scoot. And this here, you have a strat that they have assault weapons, so they can advance, shoot, scoot. This one here gives you you have a strat for an auto 6.
Advance.
Yep.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, your threat range on them is, awesome.
I think the obvious choices for this, all Gaunts are going to be good at this, but Hormagaunts and Gargoyles specifically seem like they're really built for this.
Don't doubt the Termagants either. Termagants natively have an ability where if you come within 9 inches, they get to move.
Is there? Right? I'm looking at the stratagems here. Is there no stratagem to bring a unit back to life?
There is.
There is.
There is. Unending waves. It costs you 2 CP. I see.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you can respawn the entire unit into strats. So 20 unit of Gargoyles, it's dead. Now that whole 20 units in the strat, and you can bring it back next round.
Yep. And this is not one of the type of stratagems that can be increased in cost?
No, it's not a battle tactic.
You cannot vec this one. You can't hit with anything else.
You also can't make it free, but, it does. Yeah. That blade cuts both ways, so yeah.
So this list is actually really CP hungry, so you'll probably see a lot of Swarm Lords on this list to really make sure you get that extra CP every round.
He pairs very well.
Yeah, Swarm Lord, he's a kind of a cool unit, but he's just not worth the points in so many lists. And this list, in this detachment, I'd say he's really worth it because that CP is going to be really, really handy.
Well, and to the Tyranids mechanics, obviously Gaunts, again, really shitty leadership, high chance of taking lots of casualties. So Synapse is actually very important to this list because, of course, this list can drown you in OC. Most Gaunts are 2 OC. You got dozens of bodies. You can take objectives without even having to fight for them. But if you start losing Gaunts, your chances of battle shocking are high, so you want your Synapse to make sure that you don't. And, of course, the Swarm Lord has an increased Synapse range. So
100%. And the other, the last Neurogaunt Swarm unit is actually kind of useful in this because they carry Synapse. If you have a Neurogaunt unit within 6 inches or within Synapse range of another unit, they can chain that out. So all of a sudden you can wind that unit through all your other units halfway across the table. And that Swarm is really good all of a sudden. Everyone's within that range.
And they have some handy tricks in there too, just for helping you with the things that are most problematic about running Horde armies. I know there's a -1 to hit stratagem, which is very good. They have a stratagem, an ability which I desperately missed for my Scutari when I was running Scutari blobs in 9th. The ability to basically ignore blast, right? Like your 1 CP strat, your unit doesn't count as more than 5 models for blast, right?
If you could blast this army all the time whenever you want, this army would lose a lot of its functionality. But the fact that you can deny that is critical. Like, if you're going into your opponent's shooting phase and you're looking at his blast weapons and you don't have a CP in your pocket for that, bye-bye.
Well, there's certain situations where, like, certain units, I know I was talking to Ryan, good old Ryan McLeod, longtime Trident member, handsome guy, about dealing with these kind of things, and he mentioned his Terminator, the Voton Terminators, I want to Hearthguard, I think, or something like that. Mm-hmm. They've all got blast grenade launchers. Same thing with like Space Marine aggressors. They've got blast grenade launchers. A lot of vehicle heavy lists have tons of blast weapons. So you have especially like those armies that can put out a lot of like low strength blast. Perfect versus this until they pop this strat.
Yeah, 100%. Just to touch on the movement mechanics, we were talking about Termagants for a sec there. When you come within 9 inches of them, they get to move, right? So if you have a unit of Gaunts, you're coming up with them, you're in 9 inches, they get to move like to 6 inches closer to you, for example. And now they're only 3 inches away. If you shoot at them, they're going to be within engagement of you and go first on their turn. So they're just tying you up in mud at that point. So that don't count those Termagants out. They're really good for mudding things up.
Well, this whole detachment seems like it is.
Yeah, totally.
Do you think that a detachment like is this one that rewards you for playing a Swarm MRE will never be tournament viable because you still only have 120 minutes to play on the clock? Or no, it's less than 120. It's I guess, what is it, 80 minutes?
Yeah, like, I mean, depending on you know what your round structure is, yeah, you got 80, 90 minutes probably. I think, like, from what I've heard over the years playing against people who played body heavy armies, there is a talent to it, a skill to it that you kind of work on and get better at over time. Obviously, things like movement trays help a lot. I do also think, like, an army like this, outside of Hormagaunts, probably, like, the damage potential of this army, the specifically the units that are prioritized here, is very low. Now there is again some ways in the army to buff it a bit. I know they have a sustained hit stratagem.
Right, Hormagaunts get them sustained hits 5 up, and there's other ways to buff it.
In general, Gaunts, Gargoyles, these things, it's not to say they can't hurt anything, but you're not going to prioritize it, and you are going to prioritize just get that movement phase done. Get where you need to go, as we've been talking about all night. Try to do some battle shock mechanics, and like I said, like, you really can drown objectives in OC. This army's fast. It can get all over the place. So playing the game with an army like this, I don't think you even worry about rolling as many dice as you might think that you do.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry, I was going to say, I'll give you one good combo for actually dealing out a bit of damage in this. Take a couple units of Termagants. Now, normally I don't really playing the Tervagon in this edition. Right? It lost any kind of protection. It doesn't have an end vol. It dies kind of quick, right? But if a Tervagon is within a certain range of Termagants, they gain the lethal ability. Now you stack that up with specifically the Spine Fist weapon. Mm-hmm. It does 2 shots. It can shoot in melee, and it's twin linked. Yeah. So you are critting on 5s. Lethal wounds, getting 40 shots that are twin linked.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that you can punch way up with and you, because it's a battle strat, and the Hive Tyrant can let 2 units of Termagants do that.
Yeah.
So they can punch up pretty hard.
And the strat that gives you the 5 up crits in this detachment also gives you sustained hits too to go with the lethal. So
yeah, you're getting
that golden combo.
Yeah, that's the combo you want to look at for sure.
Yeah, I do think, like I said. Oh, go ahead, Arthur.
One of the many editions ago, I think this is 5th edition. I saw an orc player play, and I thought all the stuff was dead. And then he pulled in a whole bunch of the helicopter guys that you can only get out of that Assault on Black Reach box in from reserve. And he ended up winning the game. And he explained to me that orcs rely on the ability to overwhelm your opponent's ability to remove one particular data sheet. He didn't use the word data sheet, but that's what he meant. Do you think that Tyranids in this particular detachment rely on that? That you're just going to flood with so many bodies, you're gonna go Mag the Stallion, body yada 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 yada, and just to the point where like it overwhelms any opponent's ability to bring enough anti-infantry to a table that they're going to be able to push you off objectives. That's your win condition. It's not killing things. It's just OC on points with bodies.
Yep, I think so. I think it's very, and that like you mentioned, you're going to tactically. There's a few things you're going to try to kill with your weight of attacks and stuff, but your primary focus is there. This is a stat check army. It's a different kind of stat check than what I think that word gets used for a lot.
Everyone usually throws at knights or custodies for either being a 2+ save stat check or a high toughness stat check.
Yep, and this is a different one, especially with the strat to bring units back. I think that's what this is. It's, as Sean would say, I hope you got more bullets than I got bodies. Because that's kind of the idea. So I do think this will be a fun one to play, and as I said, I honestly do think, given time, that this might be the version of Tyranids that is strongest. And we're not even seeing, some of the more combo-centered stuff, like Scott mentioned, Turvagons. Not necessarily a unit in vogue right now, but maybe somebody figures out the right combo of gaunts to buff pieces that you need in this army, and suddenly it takes off. Arthur, do you have, again, I'm sorry to keep bugging you here, but do you have the stat check numbers for Unending Swarm right now?
Well, according to StatCheck, Unending Swarm is at 48%. It's outperforming everything except for Assimilation Swarm and Vanguard Onslaught. However, we have to really understand that only 22 games have been played of Assimilation Storm, and the Vanguard is about 261. So there is substantial data to show that Vanguard Onslaught is the most competitive right now. However, only 45 games have played of Unending Swarm. And there is a limit to how many people are going to be able to source 200 Gaunts. Yep. You're going to have to play Borrowhammer unless you're that diehard Tyranid fan. Fox.
Yeah.
Add to that they changed the base size of Formagaunts and Termagaunts just by a little bit. So, but if you want to play them technically legally, you have to change all those bases off, even if you had that army. So it's like
GW's endless march towards
nobody
bases.
Tell Ryan that for your weekend. Otherwise, he's going to go base check every single model in Sean's army.
I can guarantee you he's already doing it. Ryan is on a warpath this coming weekend. So, anyhow, so like I said, there are 2 more detachments: the Assimilation Swarm, as we mentioned, and the Crusher Stampede, that we're not going to cover today, just because, again, they just don't have enough data for us to run with. But that doesn't mean they're not cool. We do want to tell you guys to still check them out if you're a big NIDS player. Crusher Stampede is, of course, very monster heavy. Assimilation Swarm is focused on a very, very tiny selection of units who are all gobbly boys. It does have some cool mechanics. Again, you can find out all sorts of info from it about it on the internet, I'm sure. So if you want to check those out, go ahead. But we did want to cover these ones off for tonight, and I have been blessed to have Scott Fox, and Arthur also was here for this video tonight. So we do appreciate you guys tuning in to our podcast here, and like I said, we'll be doing one of these hopefully for every single codex, and I really cannot harp enough. If you are interested, get in touch with us, because we are looking for players from those books to join us on these podcasts. We want to be having as many people involved as possible. Scott, any closing comments?
Thanks for having me, man. I feel you guys are kind of like local legends, and I've been doing this whole thing for a year and a half now, and it's just a pleasure to honestly be here chatting you guys up about this stuff.
You're picking up hardware a lot sooner than I did when I got into the game, so I think the local legend here must be you. So Arthur is a bit of a local legend, though, but you
can check out my OnlyFans anytime.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things there. Arthur, I know that you probably don't remember the rules for 40K, but do you have any closing insights on Tyranids and how you wish that they were an Age of Sigmar army, perhaps?
Well, I don't know if I have any closing thoughts on specific Tyranids. Now that we have 6 different detachments with 6 different stratagems each, so 36 different stratagems, and Marines are going to have, I assume, the same thing. One of the big sells of this edition was that there was less stratagems to memorize. I wonder if that's going to hold true, or alternatively, and it doesn't. This is a boon. This is a boon for NIDS. It doesn't seem like everyone is going to be playing one detachment. It seems like people are being incentivized to play different ones. So I that could be a good thing. You want to see internal balance is very important. I wonder how many books are not going to have that, and there is going to be a de facto winner, like maybe a current Space Marine Iron Hands themed detachment. And Okay, well, or first company. And if you only need to know these 6 stratagems. So I'm curious how that's going to shape out. Or one of the benefits of only having 6 stratagems, now that these books are out, are your pregame talk is, hey bud, here are the 6 things I can do, here are the things you have to watch out for, is so much easier than last edition, where it was like, I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this only against this one particular army in this one circumstance. So
I think also, like, at least from what we've seen so far, whilst yes, there are 6 stratagems to each attachment, times 5 to 7 in any given book, a lot of stratagems are very similar. Not necessarily within that book, but maybe from one book to another. There are stratagems for sustained hits. Everyone knows what that is, and you can just say that. And like you said, you only have 6 no matter what you're playing as. Or the stratagem to make a normal move when somebody comes within 9 inches. The number of possible effects that you can have is much lower. But yeah, like you said, rules bloat is something that is always a menace. I think no matter what, I don't think we'll be hitting the 9th edition levels of it, because
not until 11th.
Yeah, that was pretty big. I think we are simplified, if not simple, as GW would say. And yeah,
one thing I appreciated about this book, just on that note, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry. One thing I appreciate about this book is that it didn't blow everything out of the water. Like, on that note, like, just about how, like, power creep and all that, this came out and it gave you all these options to play equally with everybody else. Just lean into the style of game you wanted to play.
Exactly.
But none of these are like, I'm crushing everything out there.
Yep. Well, and like we talked about that so far, and the Space Marine book is looking similar. So far, it looks like, tentatively, knock on wood, external balance may just survive. And 40k, for being 5 months into an edition right now, a big edition switch, the balance is really good, and it's only getting better. Some
improving.
Some might say this could be the best edition of 40k ever. So anyhow, thanks again, boys, for joining me tonight for this Tyranids review. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you guys in some more podcasts real soon here. Before we go, we do want to, of course, shout out our wonderful couple of sponsors. We got Ed, Chris, Tyler, Frederick, and Dustin. You guys are incredible for monetarily helping us out every month and making it possible for us to have Arthur here to make fun of us. He is very expensive hourly.
It's an appearance fee.
Yeah. Give him a call. And thanks again, boys. Really could not have done this without you. So
the other way you can support Trident is we got that new Monument Hobbies affiliate link. You can check out their paints. They got some great paints. It's a matte finish instead of the satin of Citadel. Entirely different concept. If you've never tried it, you should try it. You can even borrow one of my paints to do it. But if you're going to go buy a Monument, use our affiliate link. You're going to save 10%. We get a small kickback. It's going to help us out a little bit. And maybe we'll get more content and more stuff your way.
Keep Arthur with enough paints to paint them elves.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll catch y'all in the next one.
Did you plug the Patreon? We need to plug the Patreon.